Well, good morning. This is July 29th, 2025. And we're speaking today with Doug Silvey, who is a lifelong resident of the city, except he no longer lives here. He lives now in the Hillsborough area, but he grew up here. This is where he began with the Silvey family. So we'll start by asking Doug, just when were you born, Doug?
1959 in Hillsborough, Oregon. So there was no hospitals around here, so we had to go all the way to Hillsborough for a hospital.
Okay. And how many were in your family then?
I was the youngest of seven, so there were six, and I was the seventh. So there was 5 girls and 1 boy. I have 1 brother, so I was the youngest of 7.
What were their names?
Okay, Donna, Barbara, Carolyn, Dave, Jenny, Mary, and Doug. I think that's it. I think that's all of them.
Okay.
I have it written down.
It's quite a gang.
Yeah, we had a big family, that's for
You have a
sure.
big house here in Tualatin?
Dad built the house back in, after the war. I think Donna told me he started in 46 when they came back from the war. And at that time, of course I wasn't born, they lived in the old Miller's house, which was right across from the grade school. If you go by it, I don't think it's there anymore, but it was a huge old house. And my mom lived there with a couple other families because they lived there during the war. So we lived there while Dad was building the house. So I always lived up in the house off Sagert Street, just about a quarter mile down on the left-hand side on Sagert Street.
And what brought them to Tualatin, do you know?
Well, I was trying to find that out a little bit. I think my dad's originally from Nebraska, and times were kind of tough back there. And just during the Depression, and my grandpa had a lumber yard back there, and they sold a lot of coal back then, and he was not doing well. So my Uncle Don and my dad, they hopped on a rail and they came out here. And they knew somebody in Portland, so they got off in Portland, and then somehow they came out here to Tualatin. They worked their way out to here, and this is where they kind of settled, and things took off from there. So that was back in, before the war. So it was 40s, 38, 39, something like that. So Dad's been out here a long time. He was out here a long time.
And what kind of business was he involved with?
Well, he was the Silvey Lumber Company, which was my uncle Don Silvey, who lived up by where the old post office was. And then my dad, Vince Silvey. And then my grandpa Herman, they all started the lumber yard next to where this church was originally at. So it was the church was right next door to each other. And so they started the lumber yard in 46, and it went on all the way, it went all the way into the 70s. They sold it to the Clarks, and the Clarks took it over. And then after that, Dad went to work for Multnomah County as a tax assessor, and then he got ill and passed away. But yeah, it was like I was talking earlier, it was a lot of farm goods, a lot of tractor supplies and shovels and rakes and seed, and they had hay and feed. So it was kind of almost like a feed store too, and a lumber yard.
Were you working there as a kid?
No, I kind of remember it. I was pretty young. I was maybe 9 or 10, but I remember running through there. It was a really cool building. It's still there. It's I think it's a restaurant now. I'm not sure. But it's still there. It had an upstairs where Uncle Don's family lived for a while, and Grandma Silvey was the bookkeeper. But no, I was a little too young for working there. But I do remember the church. I went to Sunday school at the church at the building in the back that was separate. So yeah, I remember the area very well.
You were here when the dog food factory?
Oh yeah, I was here for the dog food factory. We could smell it when they started cooking. We lived on Sagert Street, so we lived kind of up the hill. The plot that Fred Myers is on now, it was 90 acres, and we connected to it. So that went all the way up, and it was just a field. It was all the way to the freeway. It was a field. So when they started cooking, it would come up the hill. So it was kind of a thing. Hervin's cooking today. So yeah, we were here for the dog food factory.
So what was Tualatin like downtown then? What kind of?
But there was, I was thinking of that earlier. There was actually 2 gas stations, two grocery stores, the dog food factory, the lumber yard, the church, and a feed store, the brick building over down there. And then right around the corner they had the tavern. It was called the Spot Tavern back then. And then further, the Grange Hall was here, and I think, like we said earlier, I think this is the only church in the area. Was the Methodist Church? There was no traffic. A lot of roads were not paved. It was a lot of dirt and gravel, which was great for a kid. We'd come down here to the park all the time, and of course the park wasn't what it was then, but it was a great place to come as a kid. I was just say Tualatin was a fantastic place to grow up. I'm glad I grew up here. I mean, I consider this the country. You know, we lived in the country. So when people ask me what I say, I grew up in the country. So, you know, I'm kind of sad to see I know things change, but in a way I'm sad to see what it is today with all the traffic and the apartments and the cars and, it's not the Tualatin I remember.
Maybe a stop sign?
Yeah, we had a couple stop signs. There was one at the end of our street, Sagert, and there wasn't any coming down the hill. No, there wasn't one till you got to where the tavern is, that you turn right to, I think that's Lower Boone's Ferry. You turn right there, there was a stop sign. And that was about it. It was pretty much you just, whoever showed up first would go. There wasn't a lot of traffic. I mean, if we had 2 cars go by our house in the neighborhood, that's a lot for the day. That was a lot, so. But
then that road passed on over the river on a bridge, right?
Yeah, that kept going over a bridge, and then eventually it would go into where Durham is and continue on, and you could take a left up there and get on Hall and go to the high school. That's how you went to Tiger High School back then. It'd take you to the high school. Or if you really wanted to be adventurous, you could walk the tracks and take the tracks down to where Cook Park is now and cut over and walk up to the high school. So that was another way to go if you wanted to go too.
That's probably not a legal way?
No, probably wasn't legal. It was not legal back then. But they did have school buses. And I remember Tualatin was always the last stop. We were always, so you rode that bus for a long time.
Was that the Eagle family?
Yeah, I believe it was. Yeah. I think it was them. Yeah, that name's very familiar. And there were the buses, yep.
Was there an incident on that bridge or off that bridge?
Yes, when I was about, I think I was 10 or 11, it was an icy day. I don't remember the exact day. A gal came across the bridge and she went over the railing and into the river, and she was missing, and nobody knew where she was for at least 2 or 3 days till somebody figured it out. And the Tualatin Volunteers Fire Department they found her, and they pulled the car out of there, and there she was in the river. I was pretty young, but that was a huge deal. I mean, they shut everything down, and everybody walked down there to look, Yeah. Stuff like that didn't happen much in Tualatin, so.
Were most of the men volunteer firefighters at that time?
Yeah, I was talking to my sister Donna, my oldest, the other day, and she said almost all the men were volunteer firefighters. And they'd have to go day or night or whenever it went off, because and the fire station was over.
That was near the Grange.
Yeah, I was going to say it was right across from the Grange Hall. It was a white building. It was really a cool building, nice building. And my brother tells me, Dave, that the reason they all joined the fire department was when they'd sound the bell, on a Saturday, and all the guys would have to stop what they're doing. They'd go down there, and then they'd all go to the tavern. So there wasn't really any. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the story my brother told me. That's why they rang the bell. They'd all, I gotta go. And then
so the Spot Tavern, I believe, is the country inn.
Yeah, it was a Spot Tavern forever, and like I was saying earlier, it was family friendly. My sister Donna was saying how she'd go in there, say Mom would say, go get your dad. I mean, he might be in the tavern having a beer, so they'd let him walk in and find Dad. And, they'd have lunch, they'd have dinner there. And later on, when I was in my teens, it got kind of taken over by a motorcycle group called the Brothers Speed. And they had a clubhouse just right around the corner here, just up the road. So there must have been, some days there was 30, 40 bikes out there in the front. of the tavern. So you didn't you just kept going. You didn't stop or anything. But I don't remember an incident with them, but they were in town for a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that were the days of the Crawfish Festival?
Oh yeah, we had the Crawfish Festival. I remember that from way back. Dad, the lumber company, they usually have a float and they decorate one of the trucks with something. And I remember dressing up as a Dutch boy one time, and my niece would dress up as she was the Miss Tadpole one time, and we'd ride it from the grade school down to the park. You know, and it would be decorated flowers and say Silvey Lumber Company. And I did that, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. But when we were kids growing up, we looked forward to the Crawfish Festival. We'd circle that one on our calendar, my friends and I, and we'd ride our bikes down there. And it was very family friendly. There was a beer tent, I remember, that everybody was like, stay away from that. But it was a lot of fun. I remember it being a lot of fun.
In those days, were they catching the crawdads in the
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. The Tualatin River in those days was so polluted it smelled. This is before they cleaned it all up. It was thick on the top with just gook. And if you got on a hot day, it would smell. You'd get near it and it would smell. And there was warnings all over the place not to go in or eat anything from the river. So a lot of those crawfish festivals, they got the crawfish from someplace else. It is so nice to see the river the way it is now compared to it was when I was growing up. Like we couldn't swim in it. Well, you could, but I wouldn't want to because the companies were dumping directly into the river. And then they cleaned it up. When they got Hagen's Dam out there in Forest Grove, that started a lot, I believe about the same time. But yeah, it's nice to see what it is now with the birds and the wildlife and everything. It's beautiful down there at the park. So
the Silvey family was not only in the lumber business, but another branch was doing the suburban door.
Yeah, my brother and my brother Dave and my brother-in-law Lee, who was married to my oldest sister Donna, who's since passed away, and my father Vince started a suburban door company. I was 12 years old, so I'm 44 years ago or so. They started in Multnomah in a shed not much bigger than the church here, and I was their first employee at $1 an hour. And we'd go over there and carry the lumber out and set it outside to dry, because Dad and I would stain it. When they went from there, they moved up to Avery Street in Tualatin, Avery, and they rented a warehouse up there. And just a half of a warehouse, and they hired more people, and they got bigger. They did doors and millwork. That's it, doors and millwork. And then they rented another half of the warehouse, and then pretty soon they were staining and painting wood. And then Lee retired because he said, I'm out of here. And Dave took over the business, and he moved it just down here off of, I'm not sure what the name of the street is. It's not far from here. And at its peak, he had over 100 employees down there.
That's Herman Road.
Herman Road, that's it. Yeah, I should know that. Southwest Herman. I mean, I worked there for over 20 years. I worked there after college. I worked a few different places, but I worked most of my life down there at Suburban Door working in the office. But yeah, it was a very successful business. And Dave hired a lot. They hired a lot of people in this area who worked at Suburban Door. A lot of people. He hired a lot of my friends who didn't have jobs. He was pretty lenient. I mean, he would hire folks who give him another chance, put it that way. He did that a lot. But there was a lot of people. Don never worked there, but Don, my cousin, he had his own business too called Silco, and he was construction. So he did mainly around Portland and stuff like Portland. He was an engineer and he did construction, but that's my cousin Donnie.
Yeah, Don Silvey.
Yeah.
He's the one who actually refurbished this building, moved it here.
Really?
To this spot. Yes.
I didn't know that.
Silco.
Silco, yeah.
And then he built around the lake today.
Yeah.
A lot of that was his company that built those large buildings.
Yeah, he's still around. Yeah. Yeah. I know Don did a lot around here. I didn't know he did this. Huh, cool. That's great.
So the Silvey family has had a lot of behind the
scenes things. Well, yeah, because the Suburban Door, that was part of Tualatin, and then the lumber company, and then Donnie and his thing, and then my mom was a cook at Tualatin Grade School for over 20 years. She It started when I was in first grade or second, because we used to walk to school together. And she was there till I graduated from college. That's when I think she retired. But she was a cook for over 20 plus years down there. That was a great grade school. I mean, it's too bad it's not there. It was a beautiful building. The gym was outrageously great it was an old style gym. It was just like, it had a stage and the wooden floor and baskets. I mean, like I was telling you earlier, we played a lot of basketball, and the janitor knew us as a group of guys, friends, and he'd prop the back door open in the summertime, and he let us come in and play. And then at the end, we just have to kick the door shut and take off. But we'd be in there all day. I can't imagine that happening now. But see, that's why Tualatin was great. That Tualatin, and I was like early teens, maybe 10, 11, 12, 13, because that's all we did was ride our bikes around Tualatin and play basketball, and stuff like that. It was a great place to grow up.
Was there police around any of those?
That's a good question, because I don't remember much of the police. I do remember one incident I had. I don't know if I should bring this up, but I was with a gal parked up by the freeway, where the new freeway, 205 was just coming in. And here comes a police officer pulled in. It was a Washington County guy. And he gets out of the car and he taps on the window, and I'll never forget this. He asked her, says, "Are you here under your own free will?" And she said, "Yes." And then he said, "You guys can stay here as long as you want." He was a Washington County. Of course, we didn't stay there. We left. But that's how they were back then. They didn't, they didn't care. We could have stayed there as long as we wanted. It didn't bother him. But no, I never had any trouble with the police, and I don't know any of my friends having any trouble with the police.
In those days, farming was still around?
Yes, like I said earlier, on Saget Street, we grew up, next to our house was 90 acres, and the Coach family owned it. Mr. Coach, we used to call him. And his family owned it, and they would farm in there, a lot of wheat, alfalfa, once in a while corn, but mainly alfalfa and wheat. And hay, they'd buck hay. I mean, there's a lot of times they'd be out there bucking hay. When I got older, I tried helping them, but that wasn't for me. I wasn't good at bucking hay. But yeah, no, they always had something growing there till they sold it to whoever, and they built apartments in there. When I was about a sophomore in college or something, I was very sad that day that they sold that field, because there was peacocks in there, pheasants, foxes, coyotes, lots of cats and dogs. I mean, we'd have pheasants come in our yard, just trotting across the yard. And foxes come out. And it wasn't a big deal, So we got to see all that growing up. So I was very, very, very fortunate to see that.
Did you have your own garden at that house?
Yeah, we had a pretty good sized garden, probably about half the size of this room. It was just, Mom did a little canning, but it was basically just for us. We had a fruit room at the house that Mom had, so she'd can and we'd take it out there and put it in the fruit room. My grandma Sylvie, she lived in Multnomah. She canned a lot, so she'd come out here and can. But yeah, I remember canning season at our house. Yeah, we'd pick the berries, like maybe from around here, some of the families that were around here. I don't know if it was the Lees or the Sasakis or yeah, this might be one of those. We'd go pick them, the kids, and then we'd bring it home, and Mom would help her can the berries. And then there was a big blueberry outfit up in Tualatin. It was, God, I worked there a couple summers. But anyway, Chickadee Blueberries, that was it. And I can't know who owned that, but we did blueberries too. I was a crate boy up there for a couple summers. But yeah, it was a lot of agriculture, mainly farming and stuff. I can't remember a lot of cows or anything. But
the Nyberg family had a farm?
Oh yeah, the Nybergs, they had that four-corner, they had four corners. They had the highway, they had I-5, they had one corner, and then across the street, then they had a gas station and another gas station. And Mr. Nyberg's, their house was up here, and then the Ramada Inn was there. There was right where that mall used to be a motel. And it was called the Ramada Inn. And it was Sweetbriar. Yeah, Sweetbriar and the Ramada Inn. Yeah, I worked there. I worked there when I was a kid. And Yeah, the Nybergs were up there. Very nice people. Went to the same church as we did. I'd see him on Sundays, Mr. Nyberg, and I know he was involved in state politics.
Yeah.
I always thought that was neat that a state representative was going to our church. But yeah, their family. I went to school with Robin. I think her name was her name Robin? No.
Ellen?
Might be Ellen or something. I went with Robin Lee, one of the Lees.
Oh, Robin was one of the boys.
Yeah,
One of the
yeah,
Lee family.
yeah. The Nybergs, I can't remember anyone my age, but no, they were around, very involved in the community.
Yeah.
Mr. Nyberg was. He was mayor, I know, for a long time.
And your father was active in the church, I believe.
Oh yeah, he was a right here. This is really this is really something here. He was a deacon for quite a while. He would give part of the sermon, or I remember we'd sit out here, and of course we had to go. But yeah, he was very active. He'd actually go over and pick up his mother, my grandma, in Portland, and drive her out here for the service on Sundays.
And didn't they share a pastor in those days? With
Yeah, I was talking to my sister Donna about that. She said they went through a lot of pastors back that day. They went through a lot of people came and went. They didn't stay very long for some reason.
Well, they were young, usually.
Yeah, and then they probably just cut their teeth here, and then they went someplace else. But no, the church, it was about 3/4 full every Sunday. And then I went to Sunday school afterwards. I had a Sunday school. And the church would have picnics and, can drives and things like that. I remember and it was very wholesome America type. I think of it now. It had the church and the people, and everybody was very kind.
What did they do for fun? What did kids do for fun?
What did we do? We rode our bikes everywhere. Like I said, the roads were dirt mainly, and there was trails along the side that we made from way up top of the hill down there, and we ride as fast as we can on the side and come down here. We go to the park and ride around a lot. We go to the grocery stores and spend our pennies or our quarters or dimes. That was almost every day in the summer, and like I said, we played a lot of basketball at the school or outside. We did about everything. We didn't really get much any trouble, but we all had pets, animals too. Like I had a dog and we had a cat. And my friends had dogs and cats, and we might go to my friend Jimmy Skoglund. The Skoglunds lived up here. Dave Skoglund, brother, and I were best friends, and they had a basement. So when it was hot, we'd go in his basement and hang out there. But no. They had baseball teams. They had Little League baseball every year, summer. And what I always thought was interesting, and I don't know if they do this anymore, but in 6th grade in Tualatin, the school district out here, then they'd start a league. You were in a league. You played other schools like Templeton and Sherwood, and they'd drive you around just like a regular. And I don't know if they do that anymore. I thought that was so cool because you were like a regular team. You practiced, you had a coach, and they started it in 6th grade. And we all really look forward to that every school year. So
then did you continue with sports at Tiger?
Yeah, I continued. I played varsity at Tiger for a couple of years.
Which sport?
Basketball. I played basketball forever. I mean, all the way through. But I played on the varsity for 2 years at Tiger, 76 and 77. So we were just an average team. Who was really always good was West Lynn. West Lynn always had the good teams, and Lake Oswego. But yeah.
So, and when you went to Tiger, and when did you graduate?
1977. It was a great year. Then I went off to U of O as a freshman down there. Actually, I stayed home for a term because my dad passed away recently. So I didn't want to leave right away. So I stayed home for 3 months and went to Portland Community College. And then I went down to Oregon after that. So, yeah, and I graduated from there in 81.
Okay.
Yeah, made it in 4 years. I don't know how, but I did.
And that was in business or something?
Actually, it was American history.
Oh.
I was going to be a teacher, and I had started doing the, student teaching, and I was in the School of Education.
Yeah.
And then something came up with the family, and then myself personally, my grades basically. So I just graduated with a degree in education, and I never went back and got the certification. I mean, I was pretty close, but I just never did it. I just graduated and started working right away.
And you went to suburban Dorset after that?
Yeah, I actually took a little time off, and I had a sister who lived in, one of my sisters lived in Greeley, Colorado, so I went back there to see her. And then from there, I did a little traveling. I went to Missouri, saw where Dad grew up in Nebraska. I went back to college, Doane College, because my dad was a runner, I should say. My father tried out for the Olympics in '36. He had the state record in Nebraska for a long time in the 440. So he didn't make it, but he ran against Jesse Owens, and he never talked about it. I didn't find out about it until I found some stuff laying around the house. But I went back there to college, and then I came back here and went to work at Suburban Door. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And then you got married?
Got married. I've been married to 42 years now to Carol. Her name is Seiler, and she was from, I guess you'd call it Westport. By St. Vincent's up there. That's like West Portland, I guess. She went to Sunset High School. She's a couple of years older than me. She graduated from Gonzaga with her undergrad, and then she got her master's at Oregon State in business administration. And she worked for St. Vincent Hospital for 30 plus years. So yeah, we have 2 kids. Unfortunately, we have 2 kids living. Unfortunately, one of our children passed away after 8 months. But we have Brian, who just moving back from Seattle. They're going to live on 10th Street in Westland. And then my daughter lives out in, what's it called out there? Heading towards the coast. A small town heading towards the coast. I can't think of the name right now. I'll get it. And it's West Plain area. Yeah. She lives out there, I have 2 grandkids and another one on the way.
Great.
So, I'm glad they're living. My daughter's is kind of in the country a little bit, but they're building all around her too, just like Tualatin. Just, all the farmland is just houses. So.
And there are no more Silveys living in Tualatin?
No, my sister Donna, who's in Ohanishin, lives on Bull Mountain, and she's probably the closest one. My son's going to be living in like West Lynn, but there's nobody else in Tualatin that I know of. I'm not sure where Don lives, but I don't think it's Tualatin. But yeah, no, my son's going to have a boy, so there'll be another Silvey.
The name carries on.
Yeah, it's a good name. It'll carry on. Yeah.
That's good.
But Tualatin, like I said again, I love growing up here. It was a great town. I mean, it still is good, But for growing up and memories, I have a lot of really good memories here, and I made a lot of really good friends.
Well, I know you helped us this year in June for the
the
4th grade history day here.
Right, yeah.
And I know that brought you back a little bit. And did you enjoy that experience?
Oh yeah, I did. I did. I was amazed how enthusiastic those kids were about it. They were full of energy. And I was watching some of the other exhibits and other booths, like they were playing games. I mean, they were really involved, and some of them really listened, but some of them were just kids. But I've always wanted to get back in working with the Historical Society for years. I wanted to, and because I'm a history freak really, and I put it off, and I love early Tualatin, and then one day I came in here and saw it, and I go, I got to do something, and then I just joined, and then I saw some opportunities. So I enjoy it. I enjoy it. Right. If I can get back to the city and the history of Tualatin, I think it's great.
So you kind of, the wheel turned back to that time when you were thinking you'd be a teacher way back?
Yeah. I was at U of O. It was my junior year. I applied for the School of Education. I got accepted. And I started taking the classes, and I was getting ready to student teach at a junior high school in Springfield. And decided it really wasn't for me, to tell you the truth. I had bad experience student teaching. And I was close to graduating anyway, so I just hunkered down and graduated a little early. But the door was always open to go back, but I never did. You know how life is, you move on to other things.
So when you were here for the fourth grade program, which is a 2-day experience, we had one school
Right.
on each day. What was your role that day?
We did a booth, we did measurements and how to do acreage and measurements, how the early measurements were done for the farmlands and the communities. Actually, we went way back to how the state was put together, measured like there's a point up here just by not too far from St. Vincent's that
Willamette Stone.
Willamette Stone, yeah. I actually went to the Willamette Stone and looked at it, took pictures of it. So how that's not very far away, and it's very interesting how that was used for so many measurements for the whole West Coast, actually.
Right. The donation land claims.
Yeah, donation land claims. We worked on that. There was 2 different donation land claims, kind of, and who would get them and who wouldn't get them, and how much land you would get, and what you have to do to get the land. You have to work it for so long. And I learned a lot, you know. When I first saw the subject that I was getting, I was like, I know nothing about this. But then you start digging around, and there's a lot to it. But I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from it, and I hope to do it again next year.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, as you said, the kids can be a little squirrely.
Yes, I can. That was the only bad part, was the kids getting squirrely. Like some of the stuff on the table, they'd take it and move it around. And of course, you'd say, don't, you know. But and then, you know, there's always one kid who's kind of loud, and the teachers are trying to do their best. But no, it wasn't a problem. They're just kids. They're just kids running around.
Does any teacher or principal stand out from Tualatin grade school years?
Well, there's Mr. Andrews, Corky Andrews, and his family lived here in Tualatin, up by Norwood. Mr. Andrews and his daughter Lori and I went to school together, and they lived right across from the grade school in the corner right there. And Dad actually hired him at the lumberyard before he was a teacher. And he was a 6th grade teacher, and everybody thought he was so mean and this and that. He was the nicest guy in the world, and he always looked out for you. But you called him Mr. Andrews, and he didn't mess around. And he helped coach a lot of teams. I remember one time he made a threat that nobody was going to be able to play if you couldn't spell these words. So he put these words, and they were long words. So you go home, and I studied my butt off, and then the next day he comes in and goes, "You guys all failed." But we didn't, you know. But he was just making a point, and he did make his point. And he was actually friends with our family too, and I was friends with his daughter. But Mr. Andrews, and then I had Mr. Schattenberg at the high school. He was a Vietnam vet, and he was actually he walked a little with a limp because of his wounds. But he was my JV coach, and he was there when my dad was dying. At the time, my dad had cancer, and I didn't have a lot of rides home. But he'd give me rides home, and if I had to miss a practice for some reason, he'd let me do that. And he was hardcore as a Marine, but he was very he was very in tune with what was going on, and I missed him. He was a great coach, yeah, much better than my varsity coach, but he was a good coach. So those people made real impressions on me from the high school, and Mr. Andrews up at the grade school. Yeah, their whole family was Corky, and then I think his son. I don't know if he still owns it. He has a big distributing a topsoil and soil up there in Norwood. Big business up there that they package that up and sell it at different.
Oh, I think that's ProGrow.
ProGrow, yeah, that's his son. Yeah. I think Corky helped start that thing.
He did.
Yeah,
he started it and built a lot of the equipment.
Right. And so I remember that. In fact, I kind of think we stopped by there when they were first getting going. Yeah, ProGrow.
And then he had a service station. Right?
Yeah. The Andrews had the service station down here.
Right.
Yeah. And then, of course, the Hannigans had the service station down here on Boone's forever. There was Rick, and then his dad. His dad was first, and then Rick, and then they had various other people, but they were all within the family. But they were there forever. Yeah. And then there was a Shell station. And I remember my dad would go back and forth because he didn't want to favoritism, so he'd go to the Shell for something, and then he'd go to the Hannigans for something.
Is that Bonk?
The Shell station?
Yeah.
I'm not sure who owned that. I'm not sure, but I just remember the Shell station was there, and it was right next to the restaurant, and then the grocery store was right across the street. But And then there was nothing across there. That field, right across from the church down here, there was just a field. There was the railroad tracks and then just a giant field where all that stuff is now. And it was really neat because you'd walk out of church and there'd be this wheat growing or something right there. So
were the railroads busier than in those days, those two railroads?
I think, yeah, I believe so. I don't know if you recall, maybe, you know, do you remember when my sister and I were talking about when it derailed here in Tualatin? I was in my 10, 11, maybe 8 or younger, but derailed right in front of the church.
Yeah,
And it went over right there because you could walk across the street and look at it. But that was really neat as a kid to see that. But no, I think there was more rail traffic then than now. I don't see much here anymore. But
well,
yeah,
we have the commuter line that comes
yeah, that's right.
morning and the evening thing.
Yeah, you got that.
And occasionally freight. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there was more lumber, timber. That's when there's more timber around here, so they cut the timber. That's another thing they did around here a little bit was timber, cutting harvest timber. There was some strands of groves of trees that they'd go in and harvest. I mean, they might be a little further out, but they were in the borders of Tualatin. I'd call Tualatin, but you know, they cut them down for lumber, and then they, you know, replant or whatever they did. But that's another thing they did, which they're not doing now.
The Avery chicken hatchery.
Yeah,
Was that?
that was gone. Yeah,
Okay.
it was. Yeah, the Averys. There's still remnants of it there,
Yeah.
but the Averys were up there for a long time. That was a gravel road because that was a hill because you'd always have to watch the hill because you could spin out on the hill because the Averys were down here. Yeah, the Averys were there, and then you go further down. That was all gravel. And Mr. Helms had the filbert orchard. Do you remember Helms? Mr. Helms?
I wasn't here.
Oh, he had right across from where we lived. He had 2 giant filbert orchards. Well, people call them hazelnuts now. They're filberts. They're not hazelnuts. But he had that, and so that was another product we did in Tualatin was the filberts. And he would bus people in from Portland off the streets to pick the filberts off the ground. I worked over there. He had a machine, and I'd follow the machine and picked up anything that was, you know, he hired a lot of us kids to do that. But yeah, filberts was pretty big, and we had an acre of walnuts, 3/4 of an acre, I'd say, of walnuts. So we'd harvest the walnuts, and Dad would take them down to Newburgh or Dundee. There was a nut place, and he'd take them down there, and then we'd get money for them. But yeah, there was there were several nut groves around, which are gone now, of course.
So your hands got stained.
Yeah, yes, oh yeah. I'd put a stand out front down on Boone's Ferry for walnuts for sale, and people would always stop. Yeah, we sold them. But yeah, stained. Oh yeah, they get stained, and they have that. Yeah, it was yeah.
How about the golf course?
Oh yes.
The relationship with the community, okay?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm glad you brought that up. Long as I can remember, the golf course was there. Of course, we caddied too. That's another thing. All us kids would caddy, especially on Saturdays. Fridays and Saturdays, we'd ride our bikes down there, and there'd be maybe 10 of us, and they'd take a list, and they'd call off your name if somebody needed a caddy. And so we would caddy. We'd get $5 for 18 holes, and then maybe a tip. But yeah, as far as I know, the golf, and then they had Caddies Day where they actually let us go swimming in the pools and stuff. Yeah, there was just the golf course was always there, you know. And I had friends work on the taking care of the greens and doing the mowers.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was hotty toddy though. The golf course, that was like, you know, if you were down at the golf course, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it always was there. Yeah, there was weddings there and receptions and all sorts of stuff.
Well, are there some other things, Doug, that you'd like to share today? Some stories from the...
Well, I'm trying to think of, you know, like I said, there was a lot of just, Tualatin was real hometown, and the people got along. The doors were always open. And I always thought that was a cliche, but no, it was true. If you needed a place to spend the night because they were having trouble at home or something, you could go to somebody's house. I mean, I had one friend, his father would occasionally get a little rough with him, and he'd come over to our house, you know. So the that's what always and to me, I thought that's the way it always was and always was going to be. And that was Tualatin to me, was the camaraderie and the citizens and the people and the city. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful out here then. I was very fortunate to grow up out here in Tualatin, and I know that. So I really appreciate it. It helped mold me for what I have a real appreciation for the country now and outside. And I love camping and hiking, and it's due to this, I think. So yeah, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing here at the Historical Society, reliving some of the stuff that we did. But no.
Well, we're certainly glad you're involved, and
Yeah.
we hope we can do more with you, in fact.
Sure.
Because this is, we need to preserve the stories.
Yes.
And the objects and the building.
Yep,
and
we do.
all of that, and carry on. So
I agree.
I thank you very much.
All right. No, thank you.